Welcome to Dr. Roger and Friends, the bright side of longevity, hosted by 3 Ps in a podcast, Doc Roger, Teresa, and Danielle. Thanks for joining us for coffee and conversation.
Well, welcome everybody. Glad to see my colleagues here. And today, I am really pleased. We are very, very pleased and honored, really, to have with us Greg and Bob from Peconic Landing. I see lots of senior living and I meet lots of leaders. Bob, I've known you at least 20 years. You have shown such leadership that I am in awe. And I grew up in the military where leadership was important. We learned it, we studied it. And yet you still blow me away. And Greg, you're working with that guy. You shine also, and that's hard to do with him there. So we are honored to be a partner, Masterpiece, with you, and you make us look better. And the little we can do to make Peconic better, we're just thrilled. So I want to thank you once again for being with us today. We want to tackle the elephant in the room relative to senior living and the U.S. and COVID. During this last year, I think probably no one avoided hearing something pretty negative in the media about senior living. Certainly, there were casualties and a spread of the infection, particularly early on when we knew a little bit about it, and it was a congregate living, and it got in there, and we didn't know much about it. But Bob, I'll get you with the first question. With all of this, much negative, there was a lot of positive, but the much negative reporting and journalism that went on, could you put that in perspective and then put it in perspective of Peconic Landing?
Sure, and thank you for the opportunity, and you contribute greatly to the success of our community. So don't ever minimize that. Well, I'll just say, unfortunately, it's not always best to be one of the first. We knew what happened in Washington. We had to talk about it here at Peconic Landing. And we did a tabletop drill for the pandemic. We believe in tabletop drills and looking at supply chain and communication to stakeholders and everything. And we actually did that on March 3rd, and we found out that we had a positive employee on March 10th. So we were the first CCRC that we're aware of. We know in New York State for sure, but in the country that was hit with the pandemic. And it was big news. And what had happened that very day is Greg and I had been at a Southold Town planning board as to how to deal with the pandemic with all the fire chiefs and all the county town officials and some county officials. And we got a call that one of our employees was positive when we left. We came back immediately. For some reason, it was leaked to the media. It's no reason going back to find out why that was. But on the 10th, we knew we had a positive employee here. We had to contact the state and things like that. It went out to the media. And Peconic Landing is unique compared to other communities because we're in a small market. And, we have a small newspaper out here, and we have a couple of blogs out here and some media outlets. And these folks have never had an opportunity to be on the national stage before. And they took it. They took it. They came right after us. Again, this is the early stages of the pandemic. People didn't understand it. We'll talk later on about what we did when to stop the spread in the property. But we got hammered, to be quite honest with you. We were in the New York Times, and they put a picture up of people in hazmat suits, and no one ever wore a hazmat suit on our property. And we said, would you take this picture down? It's misleading. And they said no. We were on AP, Washington Post, London Times, French newspapers. So we became international news, unfortunately. And what the first thought of us as operators is, how do we protect the community going in the long run in terms of its brand Obviously, we were already in process of protecting our members, which is the most important thing. But we just got hammered, and there was a lot of inaccurate information that was put out there. We tried to control the media by having regular interviews. We would tell them that this is not accurate what you're reporting, and they would still report what they wanted to report. So we had I would say, a very difficult and challenging time with the media in the beginning. But the one thing that we always did is we always were transparent, and we used our website to put up the statistics of, how many employees had contracted it, which members we lost, with the numbers and things like that. And, of course, this was the very beginning. Everyone was panicking. Our family members were panicking. Our family members set up a Facebook, COVID Facebook Peconic Landing group. The media got into it. Any communication that we put out to our families was released to the media, from family members. So, we just decided to completely tell the truth, as we always did, and always have done, and take the high road. And I think in the long run, and I can demonstrate a little bit later on in this conversation how that benefited Peconic Landing in terms of sales and marketing. But yeah, we took a beating. And Greg, if you want to jump in.
Well, I'll say the one thing, that we also noticed, and Bob said, accuracy wasn't as important as you think it should be in our media. There were a number of times where there were things that were printed that were inaccurate that we would correct. But the other thing is that we found is the media that we dealt with didn't want to do the legwork. We had a few things with New York State that occurred and people may be familiar with this, in reporting and how things were reported to the state, but it was different than what was actually occurring. So the media would pick up on that, and instead of asking us why our reporting was different, they would just sensationalize it and say, they would just give the feeling that someone was reporting wrong. Not either it was us or the state was giving inaccurate numbers. And simply picking up the phone and asking for an explanation of why the numbers were different, there wouldn't have been a story. So we found that they didn't care so much about the truth. They didn't care so much about accuracy. They cared about their headline, is really what we saw.
So what was your relationship with the media prior to COVID? I can guess, but I'd like to know. Was it adversarial? Was it just, did you usually get the truth on stories and things? And so was this a COVID related thing or a sensational thing, or was it a pattern?
It's a good question. We're in a very small market. We're on a sliver of sand, out between Long Island Sound and the Bay. And I have a personal relationship with the owner of the paper. I know the reporters by name, so we had a very positive relationship with them. My children were in the paper regularly because of they're athletes, and we're the second largest employer out here, so we're big news. So we've always had this very positive relationship with them. And I will tell you one thing that we did to get a really good handle on at least one media outlet for us, and they worked with us. They would put the sensational headlines in there, but they worked with us. As our local paper, I know the editor. I have his cell phone number. He has mine. He'd call me directly. We'd set up interviews. But the bigger media outlets didn't care to have a truthful relationship with us. It was about sensationalism and getting that headline out there. And us being one of the first hit, it was unfortunate. So we tried to build relationships with the larger media outlets, which we normally wouldn't. We would conduct interviews with them, and they still wouldn't change their lines. They reported inaccurately because it didn't sell papers or it wasn't as sensational. But our local paper, what we told them was, we're always going to keep you informed, and they put accurate information out about us to our local community, which also did South Fork, because they were doing the right thing by us, and we still have a very positive relationship with them. We did all through this. They would have family members call them and say that we're doing things incorrectly. They would call us, and then they wouldn't put that in the paper because they just didn't report it. Where other outlets, we had to lock our campus down. We had reporters sneaking onto the property. We had camera crews coming onto the property all the time. They would be interviewing family members. We had they looked up our members' addresses, started calling our members directly on the phone. So we really had a challenging time here, but we just kept being transparent. We kept reporting the numbers. I would have conversations every time someone would unfortunately pass with our county executive, and he would give that information out at his briefings in the county. So people knew what was going on here, and they knew what we were doing and how to handle it. And Greg, I don't know if you want to add.
Well, I was going to mention, while we were trying to manage our campus and ensure the safety of our members, we had to spend an awful lot of time managing and protecting our campus from the media. And then as time went on, and we were not the only nursing home on Long Island and senior living community on Long Island being affected, the major news station would continue to use our image and likeness whenever they were reporting on nursing home issues across Long Island. And that was something that was that we asked them a number of times. When we're not even part of the story, you are putting our image and our name up, and they didn't care.
It took a cease and desist order from our law firm for them to stop using us as the backdrop for every COVID story.
Oh, really? Whoa. I wonder if the community in Seattle, the one that was hit so badly, experienced some of the same thing, but we don't know.
Oh,
Probably.
I'm absolutely sure they did. And families were afraid. And when people are grieving, sometimes they look the place to blame. And we understand that. We understand that. But when you tell somebody exactly what's going on and they choose to keep the same byline, which is not accurate, that's unfortunate. So those folks we stopped dealing with. If you're not going to give us an accurate check, I will tell you, I had a newspaper reporter from Newsday have her daughter, who used to play soccer with my daughter, call my daughter up at college to try to get my private cell phone number. Sure. So it was almost like a little bit of a feeding frenzy. My daughter was smart enough to say, no, I'm not going to give you my father's cell phone number. But we overcame that. We just consistently communicated to all stakeholders, and I'll talk about communication a little bit later, and just consistently put out the truth, and were transparent and gave the same message out, and it eventually settled everything down. And as Greg said, as more people unfortunately were hit with COVID, we became less of the center of attention.
We've always felt, and we've always practiced transparency. And we, during this time, it was difficult to make the decision. Are we going to be out there in the forefront telling all these unfortunate things that are happening? And we said it's the right thing to do. People need to know what is happening. And as things shook out, it ended up benefiting us. We've had people move in during this pandemic who said, we appreciated the way you were transparent, how you handled the situation. So it really, while we were wondering if it was going to damage our brand, it actually enhanced it for certain individuals.
On that note, there's two other CCRCs on Long Island who did not receive anywhere near the attention, or in some cases really no attention at all. We outsold them.
So there you go. Sometimes any news is good news, right? Well, I think we're thankful for Dr. Fauci, and we're thankful that, unfortunately, you were the first, because I think that the standard you set clearly made a difference.
Masterpiece provides communities with personalized content that keeps residents engaged and focused on their unique pathway to healthy longevity, no matter the circumstance or external influence. Powered by Masterpiece provides communities with the data and research needed to drive both the resident and community forward. Learn more at mymasterpieceliving.com.
There's so much we've spoken before that the stories were not telling. I mean, Peconic Landing had an action plan and initiatives long before anybody else was doing anything. Could you talk a little bit about some of those initiatives with us?
Yeah, I got to give credit. I've had a lot of great people, through my career. My first mentor trained me on, just do a tabletop drill run through, and some people may think they're outdated, but the simple fact is we sat as a team, we looked at our supply chains, we looked at what the PPE needs would be and everything else, and it paid off. So we had an action plan in place. As soon as we knew we got hit, we had a tractor trailer full of food delivered to the property, and we were set. So when other people didn't have meats, our residents were eating steak. And we worked with, I told Greg, it was happening in the nursing home because we didn't have a spread to the independent. We had one person get it on the independent side back then, but it was over in the nursing home. I said, you handle the nursing home over there and I'll handle logistics. So we worked with I was working with everybody, the senator, the assemblyman, the congressman, and we were getting PPE and support. So my job was to support Greg because really the outbreak was over on his side, and we never lacked for PPE. You hear these stories about staff had to use a mask for a week. No, we had all the PPE we needed. We had all the hand sanitizer we needed. We had all the supplies. That's probably one benefit of being the first. We leveraged our relationship with Sodexo and, a national company. We had them importing PPE for us from other countries. And so we were set. So we leveraged all of our relationships to make sure that our staff was safe and our members were safe. And Greg was over there in the fire pit over there battling with his team. And the other thing we did, I think, which is very smart, is a lot of staff got concerned. And we had talked about this before. Greg came to me and he said, I think we need a COVID incentive. And he said, I think, we should add $5 an hour. And I said, no, we're going to make it 10. So if you're willing to come in and without this, and we had full staffing. So we had full PPE, we had full staffing, we had fully supplied the community, and we were set to go. And that I attribute to our tabletop drill and being prepared ahead of time. There's some folks that said that well, that's over in China, that's never going to come here, but that's not the way we operate. I mean, I've in my career 30 years, I've seen Ebola and MRSA, ORSA, VRE, all these different things that you have to prepare for. So no, we were prepared.
One of the things, we did the drill, we were prepared, but as Bob alluded to and touched on, is there was a lot of unknown. We're talking March of 2020. If you think back of what you may have done or what you've seen friends do, back early on, washing your groceries and things like that, wiping them down, we didn't know a lot. So when you don't know a lot, people are scared. So what we had to do was we had to support our team members through additional pay. We had to make sure that they understood they were going to have the equipment to be protected. And as a quick side note that you may find interesting, some of the large delivery that we did receive in the nick of time was labeled from Wuhan, China. Really? Department of Health, when they came in for their third infection control survey, actually saw it and they wanted to take a picture of it because they couldn't believe it. But the key is, and Bob and I have talked about this, is we had to make decisions and we had to make decisive decisions. We could not be paralyzed by analysis. We could not be afraid to make decisions because we might be wrong. And maybe we were in some decisions, but we made decisions. We took action, and that's what you need to do in crisis. And so that was really important, is that we took decisive action. And while we had an unfortunate loss in our health center, we had one wave, and we kept it from the rest of the 300 plus members in our community on our independent side. And I attribute that to decisive action and planning ahead of time.
And I will tell you this about decision making. We did not have executive orders from our governor's office at that time to guide us. We had very vague CDC guidelines. What we really did is went back to old-fashioned infection control procedures and isolation, and just making sure that we were following the best infection control practices that we could. And they were unpopular decisions. I have very powerful residents here. They're very vocal. Closing the community down was not a popular one. I had letters to the board. I had a threat to my house unsigned. People were afraid. People were angry. But what we did is we did what we thought was in the best interest of protecting the residents. And as Greg said, we're decisive about it. I pulled the board in. I emailed the board every single day as to what was going on. And that's something I really need to focus on in communication, but I can do that later on if you wish. But we made sure that everyone was involved. And actually, I'm going to go into it. Communication was key. When we ever do a tabletop, we take a look at all of our stakeholders and we make sure that we have a communication plan in place. And our board members, I emailed on a daily basis for months. Greg and I got up and did 7-day-a-week broadcasts on our in-house television to the residents, telling them what was going on, what we were doing. If anything changed, we might do two in a day. We did that for months, 7 days a week. So the residents were fully informed. We released letters to the families several times a week. If there was a change, if there was a passing, we made sure that I was in contact. I handled all the elected officials, and we just made sure that all the stakeholders were informed as to what was going on, and we were given the same message across all these different venues so that there was no miscommunication of any kind.
Many people have characterized the pandemic as an assault, which it was, being attacked. So that metaphor, that analogy works extremely, the similarities to combat, to military operations, I can't tell you how similar they are. And your response, I think, was in the best traditions of the military, who trains for this all the time. And certainly you did you at Peconic Landing very proud.
Masterpiece is driven by data and powered by content. Maximizing healthy longevity is achievable at all times with the right metrics and content enabling informed decisions. Take the next step and learn more about what Powered by Masterpiece can do for your community and residents. Learn more at mymasterpieceliving.com. Please join us for part 2 of this 2-part episode, Senior Living in the Pandemic, The Stuff of Heroes, to learn how Peconic Landing continued to persevere and overcome challenges throughout the COVID pandemic. We want to continue to provide information that is valuable and reliable to our listeners. We welcome your comments and suggestions for topics that are important to you. Please see the description of this episode to contact the Brightside team.
You've been listening to Dr. Roger and Friends, The Bright Side of Longevity. If you like the show, please rate and review, and be sure to click to follow.